Hey guys, with patch 14.0 being the next big update we're gonna see in Space Marine 2, and hopefully Saber, please don't mess this one up again, the release of the new heavy Salamander's champion skin, I've revisited one of the weapons that sparked a surprisingly amount of debate within the Space Marine 2 community, which is the pyrocannon. Now, ever since patch 13.0, opinions on this weapon have been all over the place, even way before this patch. Some players think it's underrated, others think it's one of the weakest choices available to the heavy class. And if you spend any time on Reddit, YouTube comments, Discord, pretty much anywhere the game is being talked about, you've probably seen those arguments yourself. So over the last few days, I decided to put the weapon through its test again. Different builds, different perks, different mission types. And after all the testing, I came up with a different conclusion than I actually thought I would. Because honestly, I don't think the pyro cannon is weak, but I do think it has a big problem, and the problem isn't the damage it does, it's a lack of identity. But before we talk about that, let's quickly talk about the changes that happened during patch 13.0 that afflicted the pyro cannon. One of the biggest adjustments was 20% reduction to burn damage against terminus level enemies. This counts Carnifex, Nearwithrope, Hellbrute. At first glance, that sounds pretty significant, but during my testing, I don't think that's the main reason why the community feels so divided about the pyro cannon. In fact, while I was working on this video, Haze uploaded a very interesting breakdown of burn weapons after patch 13.0. I will leave a link to it in the description below because it's absolutely worth checking out. The short version is that several perks that are supposed to increase burn damage aren't functional correctly. Instead of stacking properly, burn bonuses appear to cap at around 15%. So if you're building heavily into burn damage, you're currently not getting the value that perks description suggests you should get. But these can't be the issues why the community feels so divided about the pyro cannon. It's more like contested HP feels awkward, crowd control feels less than expected, and enemies often reach you before the burn finishes them off. And many players feel like other weapons just do the same job way better, especially when the heavy already has access to weapons like the multi-melter. And then there's the comparison that comes up constantly, the tacticals version of the pyro cannon, the Pyro-Blaster. A lot of players look at it and think, why should I bring the heavy version? When you compare weapons like the melter gun to the multi-melter, or the plasma incinerator to the heavy plasma, the heavy weapon feels like a meaningful upgrade. The pyro cannon doesn't really have the same jump. To many players, it just feels like a larger pyro blaster, and I think that's where a lot of discussion starts. Also, let's talk about contested HP, because this is probably the complaint I hear the most. The interesting thing is that the pyro cannon works a little different than people expect. The weapon does generate contested HP. The problem is that a large portion of its damage comes from burn effects that happen after the initial hit. So while damage is being dealt, the healing feedback doesn't always feel immediate. A lot of contested HP is actually coming from the direct damage portion of the weapon rather than the burn itself, which creates a weird situation where perks focused entirely on increasing the burn damage can sometimes feel less impactful than expected. During my testing, I ended up running the Adamant Will quite frequently. The perk reduces incoming health damage after using your class ability, and honestly, it felt good. Not because the pyro cannon suddenly generated more contested HP, but because I was losing that health in the first place. The weapon was able to sustain the smaller amount way more effectively. I also found myself skipping Pure Flame in the pyro cannon perk tree. The additional burn damage sounds appealing on paper, but reducing the direct damage felt like the wrong trade-off, especially because my contested HP gets generated from direct damage. Flash burn, on the other hand, consistently produced way better results in my opinion. The extra 20% damage within 10 meters translated into stronger direct damage, more CHP, and a noticeably better overall performance. So, what is the Pyrocan actually good at? This is the question I kept asking myself throughout all these playtests. What does this weapon do better than the other alternatives? And the answer is surprisingly difficult, because the weapon isn't bad. It kills enemies, it clears hordes, it performs perfectly fine and is definitely ready for Absolute. The problem is that it doesn't really have a defining characteristic. When I use the multi-melter, I know why I'm using it, because I need horde clear, I need stagger. When I use the pyrocannon, the answer is less obvious, and that's why I keep coming back to the idea that the weapon doesn't need more damage, it needs something that belongs to it. Something that gives players a reason to actively choose it instead of simply defaulting to another option. But what does a Salamander's champion have to do with that one? Now, this is where things get interesting in my opinion, because if the upcoming Salamander's champion ends up being attached to the heavy class, which I'm hoping it is, if not, Saber really fucked up twice in a row, it would make a lot of sense to actually change something about the pyrocannon. And with patch 14.0 introducing 6 new hero war weapons this time, there's a real possibility that the pyrocannon could be one of them. Nothing is confirmed, and this is purely my speculation, but if Saber's ever going to change anything about the Pyro Cannon, this will probably be the best opportunity they have. Don't make it overpowered, don't give it more damage, but give it an identity. And again, this is all speculation. These aren't demands or balancing requests. These are simply ideas that I think fit both the weapon and Saber's design philosophy. One possibility that would be interesting would be a pyro cannon with a block payload window. We have never seen a heavy weapon that uses this mechanic before. Maybe after successfully generating 2 block charges, the weapon releases the fire shockwave that knocks back nearby enemies. That would fix the stagger issue that a lot of the community is talking about. Or perhaps those charges empower the fuel for a short duration, increasing the damage or instantly applying burn stacks. Another interesting idea would be an alternate fire mode, like we've seen on the heroic bolt rifle with the grenade launcher, like an overcharge mechanic. Activated and the pyro cannon burns, dealing significantly more damage at the cost of increased fuel consumption. There would also be room for crowd control effects, giving the pyro cannon a significantly better role or niche role during the heavy's arsenal. There would also be room if you don't want to go towards an alternate fire or damage variant. Maybe there's also room for crowd control effects. We've seen crowd control effects like shock grenades and slows already work in Space Marine 2. So why don't we give the pyro cannon the ability to create ground fire, or that firing for a longer period of time actively slows enemies hit? After all the testing, I don't really think the pyro cannon needs more damage. I think it kills enemies just fine. The real question is, why should you pick it over the other heavy options? And that's where I think the weapon struggles. A heroic version could be the perfect opportunity to fix that. Not through raw damage, but through a unique mechanic that gives the weapon its own identity. Something that makes players immediately think, okay, that's a pyro cannon. But what do you guys think? Do you think the weapon needs a buff, a unique mechanic, or is the community just overlooking strengths that are already there? And if patch 14.0 does end up bringing a heroic pyro cannon, we will find out very soon whether Saber has the same ideas in mind or not. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.